And you're good to go.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this January 18th, 2023 meeting of the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council. Welcome. So I think we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. If Hannah, I can ask you to show the flag, we will do that. Thank you. So please join me if you'd like. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And as we've been doing, I would like to ask Arthur if he'd also read the land acknowledgement.
All right. We acknowledge that the citizens and communities served by the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council occupy the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok, who are closely related to neighboring indigenous peoples, the Pomo, the Wapo, and others. Asking forgiveness for past transgressions they and their ancestors experienced, we humbly invite them to join us in person or in spirit as we give gratitude for their ongoing stewardship of this place since time immemorial. Recognizing how much we benefit from their continuing presence as culture keepers and teachers, we commit ourselves to building positive and lasting relationships with our local indigenous community and to honor all the diverse peoples of our region. And should I do a roll call?
Thank you. Yes, please. I was just going
Unless you want to
ask you next.
introduce.
Oh yeah, before we do that, let me introduce with pleasure our newest North Sonoma Valley MAC member, Patricia Galindo. Welcome, Patricia. Patricia is an at-large alternate member with a 2-year term, and tonight is her first meeting. So welcome, Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And with that, please, Vice Chair Dawson, please, roll call would be great.
Okay. Let's see. I don't have my list, but I'll just look at the screen. I think we're all here. Matt, Councilmember Dickey.
Here.
Councilmember Oldroyd.
Here.
Councilmember Morgan.
Here.
Councilmember Handren.
Here.
Councilmember Newhouser.
Here.
New Councilmember Galindo.
Here.
And I think that's, oh, sorry, Chair Eagles.
Here, thank you.
And Vice Chair Dawson here.
Great. Thank you, Arthur. Just a couple of announcements that we have been making. The Q&A and chat are turned off for this meeting. When public comment is opened, please use the raise hand function on Zoom to be recognized and promoted to speak. And if at any time our meeting has, it looks like our meeting has been hacked, we will immediately terminate the meeting and reschedule at a future date. And one thing I did want to also mention is that we do have one more spot. We are a body of 9, one more spot open on this MAC. And if you are interested, please reach out to Hannah Whitman. And her email is very easy to find, but if anyone needs it, we will make sure that you have it. So I just wanted to say that. And I think one more announcement that I have is that on the agenda item 6, which was the annual report, we're going to continue that to a future date. And I confess that's because that I was responsible for drafting it, and I haven't quite finished drafting it before we were required to post it. So I'm continuing that to February, and I'll get it posted early, I promise, so everyone can have a look at it. What we did do, which will form part of that report, is just make an informational list of the topics that we went through in 2022. And later, when we look at agenda items for this year, I think it's item 8 on the agenda, Hannah will flash up that list. So just to give us some context for the speakers we've had for the last year, and to generate some ideas. So thank you for that, and my apologies, but we'll see that next month. And Arthur, did you have something else you wanted to announce before we move on to the minutes approval?
Yeah, I just wanted to just acknowledge that that the SDC specific plan and EIR process finished up on December 16th. And, just speaking for myself, well, first I'd just like to say, thank you to the whole council for the amount of effort that was put into our response to the plan and the EIR. We really went above and beyond. And as for me personally, I felt like, at least the results with the supervisors showed that we had been heard. It may not be exactly what we all want, but at least they did adjust their plan and the numbers, partly because of what we were promoting and what we were advocating. I have other questions about Permit Sonoma that I'm going to ask Susan one of these days, because I feel like we were not heard by that agency, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But I felt like the supervisors heard us and adjusted. And so, I'm not happy with the result, but I'm not unhappy with the result. I think it was what happened was reasonable, considering that we're an advisory council and we're not necessarily going to get our way with everything, but we had an influence. So that I was happy about that. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dawson. Yeah, if there's anything else we want to talk about, we can't really discuss it fully, but we could certainly put it on the agenda if there was something further for this year to look at. Okay, so next, in advance of this meeting, you were sent drafts of both the October 19th and December 12th minutes. I'm just looking at that date because I'm thinking, do we meet on the 12th or was it the end of October? Yeah, we did. I'm sorry. I'm confusing another meeting. Yes, we did. And so if anyone has any amendments or corrections to those minutes, please speak up now. This is the time. Hearing none, does anyone want to make a motion to approve?
I second Angela's motion.
Oh, Angela made the
Couldn't hear,
motion.
but
I'm sorry, I motioned, yeah, to approve.
I
Okay,
second that motion.
all in favor of approving those 2 minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, looks like those have been approved. Thank you. Next up is public comment, item number 3, and this is for items not appearing on tonight's agenda. We have no written comments on matters. That's not quite true. I do have a written comment, but I believe that the person making the comment is going to read that exact comment tonight. So just to clarify that. So please, if you are a member of the public and would like to say something, please raise your virtual hand and you'll have 2 minutes. Hannah, is there anyone who would like to speak?
Yes, we do. And our first commenter is Deb. Deb, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have an item of importance I feel should be conveyed to the residents of Glen Ellen. It is regarding the draft EIR, the Sonoma County General Plan's housing element, which analyzes the impact of proposed rezoning of up to 59 sites to dense housing. 2 of these sites are in downtown Glen Ellen. That Glen Ellen properties are on the list belong to Marty Winters and are located on Arnold Drive, north of Marshall's Body Shop and the lower end of Carquinez. There are 5 dwelling units on the properties now, and if the rezoning occurs as planned, it will increase density on the properties to a minimum of 16 units. Looking at past development proposals by the owner developer, in order to build those 16 units, the majority of the buildings and trees would be removed. Our downtown is about 2 blocks long, densifying this area that is served by minimal public transit, not near a job center, and not near or adjacent to an urban growth area is not consistent with the general plan policies regarding Glen Ellen, nor is it consistent with the Glen Ellen development guidelines. Glen Ellen is not an urban center. In addition, the EIR does not consider the cumulative projects in our area, i.e. the development of a minimum of 621 homes proposed for the SDC site or the recent Sorkin development on the north side of Carquinez. You can write your comments, and the MAC has that information, and you should make sure and reference the parcel numbers and state your reasons. If you think that rezoning these two parcels is a terrible idea, request that the county remove the two Glen Ellen parcels from rezoning consideration. And I also included the link to get to the draft EIR report. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
And Chair Eagles, I see no further hands.
So question on Deb's comment, Hannah, the parcel numbers referenced and the way you comment and the date, is that something we could post, or I'm not sure where we put that, just to as an information item?
That is a good question. Are you asking if it could be put on the Max website,
I'm just
or?
wondering, yeah, or we could repeat it later. I know Supervisor Gorin will be making comment. I could read it from Deb Poole's written. She sent the statement she made tonight, probably with the addition of those partial numbers as a written comment. So I do have them if I look at, but I don't know what's appropriate for doing that here.
I think you can read from her written comment. I can't think of any other
Okay, let me
opportunity.
just do that. All right, yeah. Okay. Just bear with me a moment. Okay, so I have not vetted this, and we can certainly try to do so, but Deb's statement says the written comments may be submitted until 5 p.m. on February 13th via email to permit Sonoma housing at sonomacounty.org, or by regular mail to the attention of Eric Gage, Gage, in Santa Rosa. And the partial references are both begin with 054, and one is 054-290-057, and one is 054-299, excuse me, the second is 054-290-084, GE1 and GE2, Glen Ellen 1, Glen Ellen 2, I'm assuming. So I think, oh, and there is a housing element update webpage, which probably has this information. You can view the EIR. And that is, oh, you probably could Google it. It's a more complicated link on the Permit Sonoma. I mean, on the, yes, the permitsonoma.org website. Okay. Thank you for that. And you said there were no further comments, is what you said. Thank you. Correct, Hannah?
Yes, that is correct.
So I believe, I know next up on our agenda is an update by Supervisor Gorin, but I believe she will not be able to join us for a few more minutes. Is that correct? So we might switch items 3 and 4, or 4 and 5, I should say.
Yes, I believe she will be able to join around 6. So if that's okay with you, Chair, then you can change the order of the item.
Okay. And do we happen to know if we have Mr. Ken Tam in the audience yet?
We do, and I'll promote him to panelist now.
Oh, that would be great. So next up on the agenda is a presentation by Ken Tam with Sonoma County Regional Parks. And Ken, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're going to give us a project update on the Sonoma Valley Trail and Sonoma Shellville Trail.
That is correct. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and welcome. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me. Let me start my video here so you can see me. Hi, all. All right, so let me go ahead and get started. I have put together a PowerPoint presentation to help guide the presentation and some graphics. So let me go ahead and share screen. I may have not hit the right button here. I'm just sharing one more time. Hey, Hannah, are you able to see my screen by chance?
I am not yet, but
Let
you
me
should have the
see.
permission.
Let me just try it again. Let me try this. Share screen. Can everyone see that? The Snow Valley Trail? No, still not.
Yeah.
Let's try it again. Still not working. Hold on.
Looking
You
promising.
see that?
Yes.
All right, sounds good. Sorry, technical difficulties. Let me just pan over. I'll start the screen here. All right, I didn't lose you. You still see my screen, right? Okay, sounds good. All right. So the two updates that we're currently working at Regional Parks Department is the Sonoma Valley Trail and the Sonoma Valley Trail.
And
Sonoma Valley Trail and Sonoma
Ken, I'm
Shelville
sorry to
Trail. Sorry, it's a little
interrupt you.
tongue twister. Go ahead.
We're seeing your presenter view. If you go into your display settings, you should be able to just have the slides up in the upper left.
Show taskbar, display settings. All right.
There you go. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Anna. So sorry about that. So I'm presenting two projects today, Sonoma Valley Trail and Sonoma Shelville Trail. Both of these projects are identified as Class 1 bike path projects. And what I mean by Class 1 bike path, this is a definition used by Caltrans. Although you hear the word Class 1 bike path, it actually is a design standard that used by Caltrans. Pedestrians and equestrians are allowed to use it. It's just the way the design is set up, so they call it a Class 1. It's actually what it is. It's a pathway that's designated solely for bicycle pedestrian use that is fully separated from the roadway. And that's the reason why I use the Class 1 bike path definition. So if some of you are familiar with some of our existing Class 1 bike paths in the county, for instance, the Joe Rodota West County Trail, that is a Class 1 bike path. So this is something similar to in terms of our design. So the first project is the Sonoma Valley Trail. Let me go on to the next slide. All right, so let me give you a little background on this project. So the overall length of this trail is approximately 13 miles long. The project actually starts right at the Santa Rosa city limits near Melita Road, and it follows the Highway 12 corridor heading south all the way down to Agua Caliente in the unincorporated area of Sonoma County. The plan is for the trail to connect to existing planned trails in the city of Santa Rosa, Sonoma, and also connect to other regional trails. Other regional trails I'm referring to such as the Bay Area Ridge Trail, as well as the SF Bay Trail as well further down south. So what I'm sharing with you is the overall location map. I've given you a kind of verbal description. But if you follow this magenta line here, kind of following where my cursor, this is around where the city of Santa Rosa city limit is. That is the starting point. And you follow that line, it goes all the way down to Agua Caliente. So the start point is at Santa Rosa city limits down to Agua Caliente. And part of this trail alignment would actually connect to another project called the Central Sonoma Valley Trail as well. So the Sonoma Valley Trail is a continuation of the Central Sonoma Valley Trail. Both projects are identified in the 2010 Sonoma County Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. In the plan that's identified both projects, generally it's a high-level document. It actually identifies a project, but it doesn't actually tell you. It gives you kind of like a start point and end point. and doesn't really generally tell, it doesn't give you a general idea where it's going to locate, but not the specific location. So back in 2013, we were able to secure a sustainable transportation planning grant from Caltrans. It was roughly about $190,000 to provide funding to hire a consultant and also to work with the general public to help us further flesh out the actual alignment for the Sonoma Valley Trail. So around 2016 is when we actually started the study. We actually reached out to the general public. We set up a series of public workshops as well to get public input of where this particular alignment would be located. Part of the study evaluated what are some of the preliminary alignments, as well as to identify some of the possible constraints and opportunities where we actually place the alignment along the corridor. And also, it actually also helps us provide an estimate, actually also see what the cost would be in the near future to build this trail. Overall, in general, we actually had a really good participation from the general public. In particular, I recall that we actually had a workshop that was held in Kenwood at the fire department at their meeting room. It actually was well attended. It was the meeting room started. We set up some chairs in the beginning. I think originally I set up for 30 chairs, but we kept having more and more people come in. Eventually, it was standing room only. So there's a lot of interest in this particular project. So when we completed the study, the estimated cost to do the separated pathway separate from the road alignment, and back in 2016, it was $24 million. That would include design, engineering, some of the environmental costs, as well as some of the mitigation work that we had, as well as permitting as well. So keep in mind, this was estimate based on 2016. When inflation now, the cost has actually gone up. So the goals of the project is to provide a continuous class 1, again, as I mentioned earlier, separate from the roadway, and provide transportation use as recreational use. We do know that this Highway 12 corridor is very popular for a lot of the more of the experienced cyclists that feel comfortable sharing the roadway. But our design is actually making it even more safe and more comfortable, providing a separated pathway. We will also want to improve mobility for pedestrians and bicyclists along the Highway 12 corridor. The project also helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions by encouraging more people to walk as well as ride their bikes instead of using their cars. We're also promoting healthy living as part of the project, encouraging people to do more walking, provide more safe facilities for people to use. We're looking at wells to help promote tourism for the area. As along this Highway 12 corridor, we have wineries, we have vineyards, we actually have local businesses. In particular, we have a lot of folks that visit the Kenwood area to come down there, and we're looking at maybe providing a safe passage for bicycle and pedestrians. We encourage more bicyclists to help reduce the vehicle congestion, at the same time bring in more tourist dollars for the local economy. As well as we want to provide connection to school, nearby parks, and other bus routes and other trails in the vicinity. As part of the design, we know that this is a challenging project, but we also want to respect private property, as well as minimize our impacts to adjacent neighbors around the area, as well as natural resources. As part of the project, we also want to identify any other concerns that we may have missed during the feasibility study process, and also want to make sure we address as part of the project level plan. So what will the trail look like? To the photo to the left, this is actually existing class 1 bike path. This is actually in the city of Sonoma city limits. It's actually identified as Sonoma bike path. So this actually goes by through a local existing vineyard. The other photo kind of to your bottom right, this is the exact existing West County Trail along the Highway 12 corridor. And this is actually, from this photo, you can actually see the Highway 12. You have the road shoulder. This is kind of what we're looking at. You're going to have 8 feet shoulder, generally a 5-foot buffer. Then you have the multi-use trail for bicycle and pedestrians. In some locations where the right-of-way is where we don't have enough public right-of-way, we may need to reduce the shoulder width as well as the 5-foot buffer. In that instance, without having a 5-foot buffer, we would actually need to provide an actual physical barrier to provide that safety between the vehicle travel lane and the bicycle path. So trail by segment. Unfortunately, the existing public right-of-way, when I mean public right-of-way, there's county right-of-way, as well as there's Caltrans right-of-way along this Highway 12 corridor. The right-of-way width actually varies. It's not very consistent, and that's the reason we actually broke up our trail design into 5 segments. And actually, it doesn't stay on one particular side. The trail will start on the west side, and actually it's going down south. It actually transitions between sides, and the reason being that because on one side of the road there'd actually be more public right-of-way, and that's the reason why we're moving the trail to one side. So the first segment from Melita to Oakmont Drive, the trail will be on the west side, and when it gets down from Oakmont to Randolph Avenue, it'll be on the east side. And from Randolph Avenue to Warren Springs, this is down there with Kenwood. The actual right-of-way in that area is quite constrained, so the recommendation is to provide a reduced path on actually both sides of the roadway on that location. And continuing heading south from Warren Springs to down to Arnold Drive, the path will be on the east side. Then from Arnold Drive down to Agua Caliente, the path will be on the west side. All right. So where we're at this point, we actually have we have 2 design teams. Alta Planning is one, and Quest Engineering is the other. We've hired them to do some additional more of a detailed design engineering for us to help us to determine if any additional right-of-way acquisition is needed for the project. This project is currently not fully funded, so any donations, opportunities, we are working with our foundation, as well as looking at any other opportunities to secure more funding for the design work. We do have some, thank you to the voters of Sonoma County, the passes of Parks Measure M, not to be mixed with the Sonoma County Transportation Measure M, which is also called Measure M. I'm referring to the Parks Measure M that was passed by the voters. We were able to use some of that money to leverage some of the other monies to help with some of the design work. We are also working with the local tribe, the Great Rancheria. They are aware of this particular project, and they have alerted to us that there are some existing resources along this corridor, and we want to work with them to continue to protect those resources as we move forward with the design of the trail. We're also continuing to work with Caltrans. This is actually a big one, and what I mean by that, the bulk of the alignment actually falls within the Caltrans right-of-way. So we're working with them to solicit feedback on the design. We've so far, Quest Engineering and Alta Engineering has provided some detailed engineering plans, which we submitted to Caltrans, and we've asked them to kind of take a look at the design and give us some feedback, because we need to know if we can fit a portion or all of the width of the trail from the right-of-way. If we cannot, and then some locations we cannot, then we'll need to approach some of the adjacent property owners about considering purchasing additional right-of-way to construct the trail. There are some ongoing negotiations. We've actually reached out to a couple, at least a handful of property owners along the corridor, and so they are aware of this particular project. And we did mention that we may, as we're designing this project, we may come back and request some additional right-of-way. And when we have more detailed information, we'll provide that to them at the time. We're also in the process of putting together like what's called property owner information handbook that we hand out, because I'm sure we have a lot of property owners on the corridor that were not able to participate in the feasibility or any of the workshops. The purpose of the handbook is to give them kind of like a quick guide in terms of telling them, what's planned for this corridor and how they can actually get involved and how they can contact us and ask us any questions. The other last item, we're also looking at trail branding. We want to kind of brand this particular trail to identify how we recognize this trail, and we're kind of working internally to come up with a brand for the trail. All right. So what I'm sharing is, don't worry about you don't get all the details, but this is some of the draft design drawings that we're working with the consultant. This is actually what you're looking at. It's an aerial view This is near Oakmont Drive, and what you're looking at, this is near Sugarloaf Winery. So this you can see where their property borders this yellow line. This is the existing Caltrans right of way. That's what's within the public right of way. So during the development process of the Sugarloaf Winery, we were able to secure a irrevocable offer of a public trail easement on the property to help with the construction of the trail. And I'll show you on the next slide. Okay. So again, these two yellow lines, this is the existing public right of way. And this green area is where we're looking at locating the trail. And this would be located in the trail easement on Sugarloaf property. So part of this design includes crossing this driveway, as well as creating a new driveway. So this work here, we're actually kind of interfacing with Caltrans. Caltrans needs to provide us with some feedback on whether that's going to work or not. All right, here's another one. This is near Novavine. This is again, it's aerial view. We're looking at an aerial view, and this is Novavine's property. We actually met with them, I think about a year ago or so, and we mentioned to them that this right of way here is very, very tight, and it looks like we're going to probably need to acquire some right of way. They said, yeah, prepare the design, give us some details, and we'll continue the discussion. But we haven't reached back to them with the design yet because we want to get feedback from Caltrans first before reapproaching them on the design. So this is an existing condition from the aerial view. And so there's a lot of text here, but again, don't worry about getting all the information. But this shows where you follow my cursor. This is kind of how much right of way we're going to need in order to get this trail alignment to work within their property. Now they do use this access point down here for deliveries and for their equipment. So something we'll have to factor in is how we interface the trail alignment with the ongoing use of the traffic at this intersection. So let me show you another slide. So this is a slide showing what the traffic would look like. This is a aerial view of a truck turning radius, how it would actually cross over the crosswalk of the trail and how it would maneuver in and out. So this is kind of a design that our consultant's looking at, how we can minimize the conflict with how the truck turning radius comes in and where the crossing occurs. So there's still a lot of details that needs to be worked out for this intersection. So again, you notice at the top it says preliminary design. This is not final. All right, this is another aerial view. This is near Sonoma Development Center. I know you guys were talking about that earlier. This is a project alignment. Part of our one of our regional parks, Sonoma Valley Regional Parks, actually borders Sonoma Development Center. So one of the alignments we're looking at, and actually how the alignment would go over through Sonoma Valley Regional Park and connect to Sonoma Development Center. So there's two alignments you can see that we're currently exploring through here. We also know that we are aware that this is also a wildlife corridor as well. So we are also in consultation with other folks to make sure how we kind of figure out the determination, the best design solution, and also minimize the impact in this area. So that's definitely a challenge as well. This design, again, is preliminary, it's not final at this point, but just wanted to show everyone this is some work we're currently working on. All right, so next comment is how can you help? If there's any opportunities for future grants, like public grants, let us support. We'll probably reach out. That would be very, very helpful. If you know anyone interested out there, general public's interested in providing donations to our projects, we're work with our Regional Parks Foundation. They'd be happy to work with the individual. And also the communication, public awareness, to let folks know this project it's in the books. It's something we're working on. It's not gonna project. I know Supervisor Gordon wants this done the next day. I know I'm exaggerating, but it takes time to develop this project. As I mentioned, it requires the design work, the acquisition, working with the existing constraints, some of the natural resources. They're all challenges. It's gonna take some time, and the other piece is the permitting as well as money to make this project work. All right, I will pause there before I go to the next project for the Sonoma Shelville. Through the chair, did you want to open up any questions about this particular project before I present the Sonoma Shelville project?
Maybe we should wait because I'm assuming, Hannah, that public comment will be one time. And so maybe we should make our comments on both and then do the same for the public. Is there a reason to do it differently?
Through the chair, that makes sense to me to do it all at once.
Okay, thanks for the break, Ken, but yeah, why don't you go ahead and carry on and we'll save our questions. Thank you.
All right, sure. Okay. All right, so let me continue. All right, the next project is the Sonoma Shelville Trail. This actually will follow the former railroad right-of-way along A Street East. It's also a Class 1 bike path using the same design standards. This will be for bicyclists and pedestrian use as well, and it'll be fully separated from the roadway. What you're looking at in this image here, you could probably see the remnants of the railroad bed. This is to my left. This is A Street East here. There's a drainage ditch here. There's another drainage ditch. If you look at some of the old railroad design, they're built like a trapezoid shape. Well, you can still see the railroad bed. The railroad ties, they're gone now. Most of the railroad ties are gone, but what's remaining is actually part of the railroad beds left over. So generally, this is the location is where we want to locate the bike path. So the railroad along this corridor operated until the mid 1900s. Then it actually changed ownership several times. Currently, the owner of this remaining railroad right-of-way is Union Pacific Railroad. This is one of our legacy projects. This is one this project has been on the books. Give you an idea, it's one since I've started, and I've been with the Parks Department for 30 years now. There's a lot of history on this project, and some of the history is that early on when we were trying to move this project forward, negotiation with Union Pacific was quite challenging at the time, and so now we're actually making some good progress with Union Pacific. So this particular project would be a 4-mile long stretch of trail, and it would actually start at where the existing Sonoma bike path ends at 4th Street and continue in parallel with 8th Street East, and it would go all the way down to the intersection of Highway 121 and would stop there. So it's roughly about 4 miles long. So this trail would actually provide a connector to the 500-mile Bay Trail, and actually we continue heading further south. A lot of the information I'm presenting to you, you actually can go online as well. Later on, I'll tell you the webpage, and you can get more detailed information you like on our Parks webpage. Thus far for this Sonoma Shelville Trail project, we've actually secured 3 easements thus far, and actually feeds out to one section of the rail right away. But we need to acquire the Union Pacific remaining interest in their property rights. So here's a graphic to kind of guide you through to show you the project limits. So this blue line here, this is all existing. This is the existing Class 1 bike path in City of Sonoma city limit. This is what's called the Sonoma bike path. So our project limits, we would start at where the city's bike path would end, and we would connect all the way down, heading south, down to Highway 121 to the intersection. Now there's still some alignments at this point that still needs to be determined. Graphically, I kind of showed where we actually at one time consider, but we're still evaluating what's the best alignment, how we connect from the city's existing bike path heading down south. And so what here I marked here is what we've acquired so far. We have an existing trailhead here. Some of you are probably familiar, that's closed right now. It's not open to public access. That actually was part of this dedication as part of his lot line development. He had to show a public benefit, so we were able to get a 0.32 acre trailhead that would provide trailhead parking for the future development of the Sonoma Shelville Trail. The other 2 easements, as I mentioned, actually, I'm sorry, 3. One we have from the Napa self-storage facility down here in August 2021. We also have one from the A Street East Sonoma Holdings back in 2007. Then we also have one from the Wine Country Industrial back in 2006. But everything else you see future acquisition, that is actually still controlled by Union Pacific at this point. All right, so the good news with working with Union Pacific, we actually have a draft purchase agreement in place to secure the remaining interest in the property. And they have no interest in retaining it. They don't plan to reactivate the railroad. So, and parts of it's already been sold off. So sections of the railroad right away, some of it has already been sold off to adjacent property. So at this point it's segmented. So they are encouraged to sell the remaining interest to the county to develop a trail. However, the cost is actually quite high. It's about, we're looking at roughly about $2 million to purchase for the remaining interest of the property. Currently, what we have roughly between 600 to about 700,000 for the acquisition. That's way short. So we are looking at other possible pots of money that we need to get. But again, the purchase agreement hasn't been final. Once that purchase agreement is finalized, the clock will be ticking on the county side to secure additional money that we need to acquire the property rights from Union Pacific. And as part of the draft purchase agreement, we do need to prepare a final appraisal for the property, and we do have someone on board that's currently working with us on the appraisal of the remaining property rights. All right, so that's my name, contact information, email, my phone number. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Steve Arrett, who can participate this evening, his contact information, phone number, and email is on there as well. And then the last section is the Regional Parks website. So the Sonoma Shelbyville Trail Project, as well as the Sonoma Valley Trail Project, the information is on there. The feasibility study is on there. So it's a fairly hefty document. If you want to go over there and take a look at it and read more about it, it's all on there. But if you don't want to read, you always feel free to give me a call. I'll give you the quick version. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. That was great. And I'm sure there are some questions. Do you have time to stay on for a few minutes while we have some questions? Okay, council members, questions for Ken on either of these projects. Oh, please. I'm going to go with hands. Councilmember Oldroyd, I see yours up first, and then Councilmember Handren will be next, and then Councilmember Dawson.
Thank you for the information. That was great. I'm wondering if there's any sense of time in particular for the Sonoma Valley completion of this project.
No, not. I wish I can give you kind of a firm schedule in terms of completion date, which I don't have this time. Currently, what we're working on is the 30% design engineering. But as I mentioned earlier, we do need to acquire additional right-of-way. This is beyond what we're using within the county and Caltrans right-of-way. Generally, acquiring right-of-way, first of all, we want to make sure we're going to work with a willing seller. The seller, we're going to be buying an easement. We're not buying full title. And we've already, as I mentioned earlier, we've already contacted a couple of property owners in areas that we know for sure. And thus far, it seems that they're open. But ideally, these projects, they take some time. For instance, the West County Joe Rodota Trail, we still have a couple segments out there we're still working on. That project, I started with the Parks Department. I've been working on that project, and that took me with Parks Department 30 years. But we've got 13 miles of that already done.
Thank you.
Councilmember Handren.
Yes, thank you. Really encouraging and interesting presentation. Couple just basic questions. For the Sonoma Valley Trail, when you cross the road, are there going to be stoplights? Does that require new stoplights or overpasses? What's the design for the crossings?
Yeah, good question. We're actually, the way it's designed right now, we're going to be crossing at existing control intersections. We will probably need to modify the crossing. For instance, Arnold Drive is one of the crossings.
Yeah.
There is an existing signalization, but
Mhm.
that will need to be modified for pedestrian uses right now, pretty much for vehicle. The other two crossings we're looking at further down is near Kenwood. That one near, I think Warm Springs Road is one, and Randolph Avenue. I think Randolph Avenue will need to put, but by time vehicle traffic, you actually, when it gets down to Kenwood, the speed is supposed to drop, although we know some folks drive through there, but its speed drops down. So we are looking at putting a new crossing. In terms of detail, what type of crossing, it's going to be subject to Caltrans review and approval. It could be the one at Kenwood, could be what's called like a hawk design. And what I mean by that, it's not going to be like, it's not a full on signalization. Is where, for instance, if a pedestrian want to do a crossing, they'll push a button, then you'll have on each side, you'll have these flashing lights, these beacons, they flash and tell the vehicle, hey, pedestrian is crossing, so they need to stop. So that's one possibility. But again, it's still subject to Caltrans review for approval for any type of crossing within the right of way.
And then just one other question. It doesn't look like the trail requires any modification of the traffic lanes, right? Like
No.
it's something that's
We
changed.
may, in some locations, this is not on the throw on another design scenario. For instance, let's say the adjacent property owner on one side is not willing to sell us the easement, and if the site distance for the vehicle is still good at that particular location, there is a possibility we could look into doing a center line road center line shift, right? So what I mean is that we would shift the road alignment, the lanes would actually be shifted to the other side. Let's say we have more room on one side, we could actually do the lane shift, or if the adjacent property on the side that's being affected by the proposed lane shift, they're open to selling us some land, then we can actually do a road shift. So that is also a possibility. But ideally, we want to be able to keep the existing road configuration, as is, but shifting the roads, something like that is a possibility for the design.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Dawson?
Hi, thanks, Ken, for a great presentation, and really exciting to see these bike trails, becoming a reality slowly. And I want to say, we have some experience in the MAC writing letters, and I'm wondering if we could write if a support letter would help your efforts. Let us know. I think we could do that. It would be far easier than some of the other stuff we've written. So anyway, just wanted to offer that as a possibility. I was curious if there's any plan for access from the Highway 12 Arnold Drive intersection down into downtown Glen Ellen, like along Arnold Drive.
Not at this time. In the bike plans, there are identified bike lanes on Arnold Drive. They actually could feed into the Sonoma Valley Trail, but that's actually a separate project. So just a little background, per the general plan, county general plan, regional parks is responsible to designate the class 1 bike paths. The class 2, such as I mentioned, like Arnold Drive, that's a different department. That actually is the county public works department. Their responsibility is to designate and design class 2 bike lanes as well as class 3. We just started a couple of months ago. We restarted a kind of a coordination meeting with our partner, Public Works, and we are looking at projects where we can actually partner with.
That I think that kind of answers one of the other questions I had, which was how this would connect in with this. I think it has been called the Central Sonoma Valley Trail.
That is correct.
It's
Yeah.
also been in the works for probably three decades as well. I remember doing some stuff on it back in the early aughts.
Yes.
And so that would be TPW that would be responsible for that one, assuming it's not a class 1.
Yeah, it'll be a class 2 bike lanes. Are you familiar with class 2, the definition?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, just for everyone, as I mentioned, the class 1 is a fully separated pathway. A class 2 bike lane is actually, you'll see on a road, usually it's striped. I'll say bike lane on it, and it's actually striped, but you're sharing your right of way. There is no separation between you and the travel lane. So when a car goes by, If you're riding a bicyclist, if you're a bicycle, you're riding your bike, or you're walking, you'll feel the wind drift from a car when they go by you. So that's what a class 2 bike lane is. It's actually just a lane, and it says bike lane, and sometimes they'll have a sign as well, it says bike lane. That's what that is. But we also, Arthur, just to mention, we also interested in TPW's future improvement as well, because Sonoma Valley Regional Park, we get a lot of visitors. We have folks parking along Arnold Drive to get access to Sonoma Valley Regional Park on the west side. So our park is bordered between Highway 12 on the east side, and we got Arnold Drive on the west side. And we have the public accessing our park from both sides. So it would definitely be a great improvement. We get improved access on both on the east side as well as the west side for the general public.
And one other question, kind of along the lines of the class 1 and class 2, there's been an idea around for probably 15 years of creating a Glen Ellen community bikeway, which would connect Madrone and the apartments down by Madrone and that neighborhood with downtown Glen Ellen. So it would come through some of it would be on streets, so that would be a class 2, but then you can connect in with the regional park, which would be a class 1, where there's already a class 1 bikeway, and then it would come back out to a street. So if there's enough desire by the citizens to have a bikeway that incorporated both class 1 and class 2 into kind of a single, but you were talking about branding, so let's just call it the community bikeway. How complicated would that be?
Yeah, I would need to take a look at the alignment, and then I can give you some feedback on it.
Okay, I've got a map all made, so I'll send you an email and yeah, see what you think.
Okay, yeah, the purpose again for the branding is when folks come out, when we say, for instance, like the West County Joe Rodota Trail, when we call out Sonoma Valley Trail, folks will say, okay, I know where that is. I know what project you're talking about. And we would probably also maybe identify some kind of logo or symbol that would be associated with Sonoma Valley Trail.
All right, thanks, Ken.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilmember Newhouser, I think you're up next.
Good to see you, Mark. It's been a long time.
Yeah, you too, Ken. I know it's been a while since we worked together on the Flowery School Trail, and so there at Larson. So yeah, good to see you, and thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I had a few questions. You kind of answered one. I mean, obviously, in our area, we would need to deal with TPW to do any signage, because there is interest in putting in, class 2 and 3 signage and maybe striping on some of our back streets and roads. Right now, as you can imagine, Warm Springs Road is a nightmare. There's no shoulder. It's just you take your life in your hands if you ride your bicycle along Warm Springs. And I'm just wondering, and we'll take our request to the county public works, but in your experience, can the trail markings, signage and striping, act as a traffic calming device to help slow people down?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, sometimes reducing the travel lane also can help with traffic calming. Generally, when public works, when they will do a striping, like adding a bike lane or adding a bike route sign for like a class 3, generally it needs to be designated in the county, in the 2010 county bike plan. So just a little background on the 2010 bike plan, how that comes about. It gets updated. It's supposed to get updated every five years. We're way behind on that. But generally, when we make an announcement, say, hey, it's time for the county to update the plan, and we host a series of community workshops, that's when the general public comes out, say, hey, you know what, we need to make this roadway safer for bicyclists and pedestrians, and that's how particular projects get identified in the plan. So, for instance, the Sonoma Valley Trail, Central Sonoma Valley Trail, that comes from the community. They say, well, wouldn't it be great to have improved public access for pedestrian bicycles, point A to point B? Then once we will look through it and say, yeah, that looks like it's feasible. They get put puts into a plan, then it's up to staff to look and get additional funding. As I mentioned earlier, we got funding from Caltrans to look into additional detail and determine if whether it's feasible or not. But generally, it needs to be identified in the county's bike plan.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Well, we certainly would like to be notified. Should we get in touch with Public Works regarding that process?
I will. Yeah, I could, on your behalf, I will reach out to them. Permit Sonoma in the past, they're the one that actually takes the lead initiating. Gary Helfrich was the planner the last time they did the 2010 update. And he would, our department, as well as County Public Works, would actually be involved and participate in the process. But I will notify on your behalf. I will notify Permit Sonoma to make sure they reach out.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be most appreciated, because I'm sure that, I mean, we have a committee that addressing that issue, and we all would love to hear more about that. One other question. This is a little bit more arcane. It has to do with the legal implications of railroad right-of-ways and conversion to bike paths. And my understanding was that these were originally lands that these easements were deeded to the railroads from the public trust to be used for transportation and for commerce to benefit the growing populations. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that any railroad easement that's being abandoned would have priority to conversion to transportation purposes such as bike paths and pedestrian walkways. And I was wondering, I was a little surprised when you said that some of these properties on 8th Street East transferred hands with the sale of the adjacent properties, without a first right of refusal to the county for purposes of transportation for pedestrians and bikeways. And could you address that?
Yeah, in terms of the transaction, the history, I don't have the history on that. So you bring up a good point. This is probably going way back. Originally, that was our approach. I worked with county council. Stating that once the railroad right-of-way was no longer being used, it reversed for public use. And I originally just tried to schedule a board action to have the board take that particular action. And we did, as a courtesy, we notify Union Pacific, and Union Pacific says, no, you do not have any authority. And they say, if you move forward with that action, we will see you in court, pretty much in court.
Is that because it was formerly abandoned?
Yeah, abandoning their use, but they're saying this, even though they abandoned the use as a railroad access, they still have access rights to the railroad right away.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I work. So I'm probably not the railroad expert, but we did work closely with county council, our county council on that, and they're the one that advised us, saying this is the direction you need to move forward with. And we said, okay.
Well, good luck. Yeah.
Well, right. As I mentioned, this is one of our legacy projects. I'm looking forward. Hopefully, we can secure the additional money. As I mentioned, Union Pacific is eager to sell, but they want $2 million. That's a significant.
That's huge, especially since the land was probably given to them in the beginning. But who knows?
Yeah, just to let you know, they've been trying to sell off sections of it. They've actually were able to sell off sections. I think they sold off at least 4 or 5, but they were trying to sell off more sections. That I did contact one property owner and said that why would I? It's one of the sections of the right of way contains a huge drainage ditch. The Shelbyville area. That area is flood. But anyway, one property owner said, "Hey, I'm not going to buy a drainage. Why want to buy a drainage ditch?" So right now, what Union Pacific, what remaining parcel is pretty much left over. No one else has come forward to interested in buying it, except for for the county, because we want to provide public access for a trail connection along there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you all have really good questions, good comments. More.
Yeah, a few more, it looks like. Okay, Council Member Nardo Morgan, you're up.
Thank you. Ken, thank you for this really great presentation. And I want to say so many of us for so long have wanted this bike trail. And I'm assuming it's more than a bike trail, probably a multi-use trail. So we're all, I think we're very excited about this. You may have actually answered my question. You've answered so many of my questions, but one in particular is I was very interested also in the timeline. And I know that it's a very complex situation. And I was wondering, is it more of the funding that you mentioned, donations and grants and letters, but also there's land acquisition. So is it equally weighted? Like, is it more a question of you really have to get this land from Union Pacific, or you really need to raise the funds? And I was wondering, as an organization, our MAC, are there any ways that we can help you, or we can get the word out, help you publicize it, maybe even help you do a fundraiser? Just wondering, what is going on with this timeline, and is it equally weighted this way?
Yeah, it varies in some location by section. Some sections are a little more challenging than the others. In some sections, it's clear that we don't need it to acquire additional right of way. In some locations, it's going to take some time to acquire right of way. The other item I think I mentioned is the permitting. The permitting process. If there's any wetlands along the area, that's gonna take some time. I also mentioned I'm working with the tribe. There are some existing cultural resources along the corridor that we need to protect. And if that is the case in some location, we may need to shift the trail. That would mean we need to acquire some more right of way in other sections. So I thank you. And if there's opportunities where we can reach out to the MAC to ask for like a letter of support, we definitely will. So I think overall, I think Sonoma Valley Trails, in terms of timeline, that particular project is going to take a lot longer. I think for the Sonoma Valley Trail, if we can secure that funding, that $2 million, I'm starting to see the light at the tunnel, so to speak. At least from I would say from Napa Street, just where Sonoma's best is, heading south. Once we acquired the remaining right of way from their properties from Union Pacific, that means the county, in addition to the trail easement, we would have control. I mean, that's key. We have control of that section. Then the next piece is we have to secure funding, for the project, for the design and development. We do have an engineer on board right now. He's done a little bit design work for us. I am running a little out of funds on that, so I'm working with our manager trying to get some more funds to continue the design work on that particular section.
All right, thank you. We'll put our heads together, see what we come up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, if this is very helpful. I know you're respecting your community. Now that I've identified the project limits, one thing I mentioned in one of my slides to help get the word out. If you're having a coffee discussion or a friend, coworker, if you know any property owners along that corridor, along on the Sonoma Shelville or the Sonoma Valley Trail, if they're interested in seeing the public benefit, how this can improve bicycling and walking along the corridor, connect me and reach out and say, hey, Ken, I met so-and-so out here. He's excited about this trail project. I'm gonna give you his name, phone number, reach out to him. That would be definitely great. Just let him know I don't bite.
Ken, I don't see any hands up. I'll have a quick question. Angela, you just asked sort of part of my question. So it sounds like for Shelville, money and Union Pacific. So you see the light there at the end of that tunnel, it sounds like. But for the Central Sonoma Valley Trail, is there any opportunity? How do you think about this in terms of getting shovels in ground? Do you have to have everything worked out with Caltrans and all permits acquired, all land easements negotiated before you start, or is there any sort of strategic benefit to starting at the Melita end, or even at the STC, the developmental center end? And my thought is, once people start to see it happening, are they more inclined to go, yeah, we've got to do that? Or is that just not a possible way to approach a project of this sort of magnitude?
That's a great comment. I don't know if you heard of this term. My manager uses that. We want to design this particular section with independent utility. And what I mean is that we're not going to be able to build this whole trail, this 13, like the Sonoma Valley Trail. We're not going to do all 13 miles in one swoop. We're not. So we're going to identify strategic locations that can provide independent utility where we can develop a particular section. People can use it and see the benefit of it. And that would help us to get more people involved. So right now, there's a couple of segments. For instance, the section closer towards Santa Rosa, Oakmont, we definitely have folks in the Oakmont community that want to get that particular segment done. So there are common areas that they own. We reached out to them, and we're going to continue. So that might be a piece that we might be able to push forward, the section near Santa Rosa, near Oakmont. The other piece that we control, we own, is the Sonoma Valley Regional Park. We actually own a significant frontage along there, along Highway 12. That's another piece we can actually probably do. So to answer your question, no, we could do particular segments as long as we have control of the land. Then the next piece is we got to get the funding to do all the design, engineering, and the permits and any mitigation that we need to do. And if it's some of the work that it's within Caltrain's right away, generally that'll take a little more time because we need to get their permission. They have a review process, a standard review process that's in place. They can't be changed, and it takes a lot of time to go through those steps. So great question, good comment.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Welcome, Supervisor Gorin. Do any of other council members have other comments or questions to ask before we move to any comments from the public? I am not seeing any hands. So if any of our members of the public would like to make a comment on this topic, please raise your hand and we will get you called on.
And Chair Eagles, I'm giving folks a few moments, but I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. Any last comments or questions from council members? I don't see any, so I will thank you again very much, Ken, for this presentation. Very informative, and for sticking around for all these questions. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Good night, all.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Supervisor Gorin, that was perfect timing because we just did a little switcheroo in the agenda, and your update is up next. Oh, I think you are muted.
Unmute. There we are.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful to have Steve, Eric, and Ken working on our bicycle paths hither and yon all over Sonoma Valley. I've been working with them since I was first elected because it was what I really wanted to accomplish in my years as supervisor, is to increase the number of miles of multi-use paths as well as widening the lanes at Arnold Drive. Little did I know how challenging it would be. But we are making progress, and I'm excited that Ken and Steve have been plugging away on the Sonoma-Shelbyville Trail for much longer than I've been in office, and we are making some headway. So your question was good, and I still have the question, where are we going to provide, how are we going to get the funding to actually purchase the right of way and to let alone construct it and make it happen? That's still a question mark in my mind. And I would love to see at least one section of the Sonoma Valley multi-use path completed in the next couple of years. And I'm not sure that will happen. I'm going to be lucky to see Arnold Drive bike lanes completed. It's one of the priorities that I articulated to the board. The board held a sort of a pre-strategic planning yesterday, where we talked about priorities for the county, priorities for the districts. And I said, for the second or third year in a row, we have to grapple with faster production of bike lanes and multi-use paths. It's torturous. It takes forever, multiplicity of funding. And we have only a couple of folks with regional parks, especially working on bike projects throughout the county. So I'll see what kind of progress we can make in combining the talents of transportation, public works, now public infrastructure, as well as regional parks, to try to work with SCTA, find the funding, do the design work, and cutting through that. And I think next month you'll have an update from TPW to talk about the Arnold Drive bike lane project. And we're getting ready to have a community meeting potentially in March. But I asked them to give presentations to you on that next month, both you and the Springs MAC, because it sort of spans the area between the two MACs. And I've been working on this for 10 years, 3 directors, and SCTA to sort of piecemeal this together. And it's laughable at this time how long it has taken. So that was the report from yesterday. We did look at the calendars for the year, items of significant interest. Coming forward, we'll have a discussion about that on January 31st at the board level, as well as some updates on homeless services and some funding opportunity for homeless service providers. So January 13th might be a good meeting for you to look at the agenda and do some research on that. As you know, we have approved the contract for Christina Rivera as our new CAO. And I'm very excited that she is, the board is going to approve that. Well, we did approve that at our Tuesday meeting. And she participated in our planning meeting yesterday. Born in Mexico, fluent in Spanish, schooling in Mexico. She understands what it's like to be an immigrant to this nation. And trying to get the professional credentials to go to work. She's amazing and just so animated and charming. I hope at some point she can be present at the MAC meeting to introduce herself, and you can pepper her with questions about what in the heck does the CAO do? But we are shifting a little bit at the county level to a stronger CAO. Previously, Bob Dice was a very strong CAO and rubbed some board members the wrong way. So they carved back a lot of the hiring and evaluating responsibilities to the board. And each year we move some of the departments into a direct reporting relationship with the CAO, but we still have a few that are recruited and evaluated by the board. And our next recruitment is the executive director for the Economic Development Board. And we are recruiting now, and as probably advertising that as a direct report to the CAO. And so that will be coming forward. We also had a preliminary discussion about the management review of Permit Sonoma. If you've tried to take out permits from Permit Sonoma, you'll understand the frustration of many, how long it takes to get a permit. You never know where it is stuck in the process. And my first line is going directly to the director. Could you please unstick this? They've been in process for months or years. And so that's not the best way of doing things. We'll also be discussing that on January 31st. So if you have an interest in development issues, streamlining proposals, moving forward with online reporting, third-party check, permit processing, you might read that somewhat lengthy report of about 60 or 65 pages. And we obviously, we've been dealing with a lot of water. And if you've looked at the videos of Shelbyville, a lot of water, this huge river and lake of water has been flowing through Shelbyville. And I want to thank Shell Vista for posting the video. It was pretty revealing. This is a state highway that's been closed for a week or more. And I claim that Arthur is the expert on creeks, all things creeks, but Richard Dale is also an expert and really commented very knowledgeably in the IT about the historic nature of the flooding of Shelbyville. And I also mentioned to the board that this is going to be a priority of mine, once again, reaffirming to me how important this intersection is. And there could be solutions upstream as well as downstream to alleviate some of the flooding, hopefully, maybe not stop it totally. So I'm looking for funding, and I'm going to gather some folks together to start the discussion on that. And I thank Mark and everybody in the Sonoma Ecology Center and Arthur for their great expertise on the historic nature of our creeks. I don't think it was Mark that sent me this. Stephen Lee sent to me a video of Sonoma Creek that has started carving out the bank of a house in the Marty Drive area. And I'm really concerned that we're going to lose that house. It's going to fall into the creek. Get some solutions, but it will take maybe some FEMA money to come in. I don't think we can put boulders on the creek to save that, but his idea was, can we use FEMA money to move the house as the first house in the Sonoma Developmental Center? That will take some doing, but it would be intriguing to just flip that house, turn it around, and have it be part of the SDC. I think those are the reports that I have. I apologize for being late. My mother-in-law is not doing well, so we hover and bring some dinner over and encourage her to have a few bites to eat. So I'm a little bit late tonight. And let's see. Yes, I was rather firm in saying, okay, the community plaza idea was a good idea. Maybe not with that partner. The community reacted very viscerally for lots of good reasons, and I understand the reasons. There may be some grassroots efforts to engage in conversation, bring the community together to talk about, is a community plaza important? If so, where? If so, how? And I know that the parking at that parking lot is very important to the businesses surrounding that. And that has been the tension of putting a community plaza at the front door of the Sonoma Mission Inn on top of a parking lot. So stay tuned on that. And I think I will just conclude my report and say thank you all once again for the good work that you're doing at the MAC, and I'm available for questions.
Hold my earphone out. Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you for those comments. Council members, any questions for Supervisor Gorin? Oh, Mark, Councilmember Newhouser, please go ahead.
Hi, Mark.
I had to unmute. Hey, how you doing? Thank you for the shout out. Yes, I think that we would be very interested in participating in any future conversation about water management in the valley. I think it's a known issue. We've had a reprieve over the last several years because of the drought and not having to address the problem with permeability and with runoff and flooding, et cetera. So I think that it's hopefully not too late, because there's so much development that has occurred in the last 20 years that could actually make it difficult to manage water upstream before it causes flooding and damage. But I think that it's worth taking the time, especially getting experts in the valley together with public agency representatives to actually have a meaningful conversation about that. So thank you. look
Thanks,
forward to
Mark.
it.
And I think across the board, every board member was interested in exploring the concept of stormwater banking, either aquifer storage and recharge through injection system, or infiltration, diverting some of the water into vineyard land and perhaps the Sonoma Developmental Center for infiltration. I think there are opportunities there. And I know that my good friend, Susan Hayden, with the water agency, she's now working as extra help, but she developed the manual on stormwater for both Petaluma Valley and Sonoma Valley. And the board did discuss, well, maybe there's an opportunity for public education to have a workshop on flood control districts, those archaic districts that most of which are not really funded, but they could serve a better purpose. And we're going to be planning a number of workshops on any number of things this year. So stay tuned and I'll make sure everybody is aware of that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dickey.
And just sort of a spontaneous question. So it may not be well articulated, but I know that the sanitation district periodically needs to use Nathanson Creek as an overflow during flood events for the problems that arise building a sanitation plant in a floodplain. Do those fines become public? Do we ever know how much it costs annually or periodically every 10 years, what the sanitation district is paying in terms of how much it's costing us for that district to be in that location?
Well, sanitation treatment plants are always downhill from just about all development because the water, the waste is gravity fed going downhill. I'm not aware of discharges from the treatment plant, and you're right. It did happen, not frequently, but sometimes with Santa Rosa, and it may happen with Sonoma Valley. I know that we have been fined through the Regional Water Quality Control Board by the sewer overflow, the manhole sewer overflows, the disgusting things that may pop out of the turnouts through the sewer lines. The good news is we've done enough repair work and management of the system that we've had no sewer overflow events in Sonoma Valley, which is unusual because the lines leak like a sieve, all the cracks, and when we have large rain events, the rainwater infiltrates into the sewer lines and then it reaches capacity and it overflows. And we've had no events this year. So I think that's a first, especially given the amount of water that we've absorbed. But I think it's a good question to ask whether or not they do pay regular fines for that. I don't think it's done on a regular basis because the Regional Water Quality Control Board monitors all of that activity very carefully, but I'll ask the question, and you may want to invite Brad Sherwood, Assistant General Manager for the Water Agency, to the MAC to talk about how they were responding to the flood events, managing the water systems and the wastewater systems. And you should know that there's a lot of deferred maintenance in our water delivery system. And we're looking at some educational outreach efforts so that you all know what kind of expenses need to be incurred and planned to provide resilience and reliability into the system. And that means higher rates, higher water rates. Significantly higher water rates. So if you have an interest, you may invite Brad in to talk about that.
Thank you, Councilmember Dawson. Oh, sorry, Matt, were you finished there with that one? Yeah, okay.
Just Mark, just a quick answer to I think it was your question about where the fine money goes to. Some of the work I did at the Ecology Center was covered by some of those fines. And I did a whole report on the historical hydrology of Sonoma Valley, and it's clear, at least largely why the flooding's happening because of all the modifications that have been done. And I won't go into it now, but if anybody's interested, just contact me and I can send you a nice thick 50 or 60 page report that has maps and covers all the changes.
Send it to me.
Okay.
Sign me up.
Okay.
And you're right. I didn't answer that question. I know we were fined for the sewer overflows, and what we did was divert those fines into funding sewer lateral replacements to replace some of the leaky pipes. So some of the folks in Glen Ellen and along the trunk line did receive grants to fund the lateral replacements and to minimize the amount of infiltration that's entering into the trunk line.
Any other comments, questions from council members? Are there that's your previous hand up, correct? Okay. So I am going to open it up to public comments for the supervisor. Anyone wishing to, please raise your hand.
And again, just giving folks a few seconds, but I'm seeing no hands from the public.
I do have one more report out. It is absolutely tragic that we have another pedestrian fatality at the intersection of Verano. This brings back Caltrans, our district, have all been out there walking that intersection, and Caltrans is slow to respond to the sense of urgency from the previous fatality, and there were some extenuating circumstances, certainly. I have scheduled a meeting with them again. The real challenge is it requires some funding to upgrade the signals at that intersection to provide dedicated left-hand turn lights. And I think that was sadly the vehicle turning into a person in the crosswalk. That should not have happened, and my patience has run out. So I had a great conversation with Johannes Huvert's Director of Public Infrastructure today and say, stop it. I don't care what Caltrans is doing. We have to do something. So he jumped on it. I suggested a stopgap solution, which is buckets at each of the corners with a series of dowel rods and fluorescent pennants. So they're posted now. They're on social media, and the instructions are you take a pennant out of the bucket, wave it madly to catch the car's attention, deposit it in the bucket on the other intersection. And it is not the final solution, but I'm tired of Caltrans not doing anything. So this is our stopgap solution, and maybe they will be embarrassed enough to put this on the priority list. I actually saw this in Salt Lake City when I was crossing an intersection, and I took photos of it, maybe lost in the fire, I don't know, but I stored it away up here, and Johannes did some research, and they're called, and they're commercially available, called See Me pennants. Yeah, that makes some sense. So we'll try it out, and Johannes was very excited about a pilot project. Mostly, I'm just looking at a more permanent solution for that intersection.
Yeah, absolutely. Councilmember Dickey, you had a comment.
Sort of an associated question. You know, the Paul's Saloon property is going to be developed into both a housing and a hotel. Is Caltrans required to do those improvements before the hotel and housing development can be constructed? Or, I mean, what happens when all of that traffic and the pedestrian population now inhabits that area and there's still no improvements?
They are not required to do that. That is Highway 12. The hotel is on a county maintained road. It's part of the challenges. I can go back and look at the EIR to figure out what kind of modifications need to be made. That's another location that I have some real concerns about because there is some cross traffic there. There is a pedestrian flashing signal there. And it is, first of all, it's not totally the fault of drivers when they're driving in a darkened, wet environment. People, could you just wear reflective clothing as you're crossing the roads? Doesn't matter where you're crossing the road. Don't wear black clothing. Wear a reflective armband. Or a reflective vest. Practice defensive walking and never cross in mid-block. Cross at the light, especially at night, or at a pedestrian crosswalk. Doesn't mean that drivers are absolved because we have too many accidents where they're going too fast and not paying attention. But I bicycle defensively, and I encourage everybody to walk defensively as well. But I'll get the answer to your question, but I don't think they're required to upgrade that intersection as a result of that project, because that project fronts onto a county maintained road.
I mean, you can understand the nature of my question.
Absolutely.
And
And others
it's a
have asked
proximity isse, if nothing else. And it just, gosh, Susan, we see this so often that use this one as an example where you're going to create a massive change to an environment that's already sort of toxic in a lot of ways for both pedestrian and vehicular traffic. And it just seems like there's always this disconnect in timing of improvements. Oh yeah, we can do all the development, and then you wonder how many people are going to be injured or even potentially be dead before Caltrans or somebody else has to take, does the proper thing and does an improvement.
We can't require can't require Caltrans to do the work. But you raise a really good point. Development is permitted with a series of conditions that are appropriate to the level of added trips that they generate. And so often they might, be required to put sidewalks there or turnout lanes. I know of instances in Santa Rosa where everyone in Southwest Santa Rosa, every developer was required to pay into a fund to fund very large, expensive projects that never were completed. And so they were irate when they'd been paying in these traffic improvement funds that just sat there. That was not the case, I think, in this situation of Verano, but we've had multiple meetings with Caltrans and CHP, so we'll try it again. I totally expect that the Springs MAC will write a letter to Caltrans again, as they've done before. Another fatality. You need to prioritize this intersection. And that'll be my strong message to them as well. If you want to write a letter about that, feel free to do that.
Okay. Amongst the many other letters that I've written.
That's right. That's right. You may have written a few. And thank you for that, Matthew.
Co-Chair Dawson, did you have a comment, or your hand is down again? So maybe you decided.
No, it was covered in the discussion.
It was covered. Okay.
Thank you all. I'll put myself on mute and I'll listen in. And I'm so glad you asked for an update for the bicycle projects. So important. And just a note, I started the discussion regarding the Arnold Drive bike lanes. First of all, it was important. But secondly, I knew that the Sonoma Developmental Center would develop. And I assumed that the bike lanes would be completed years ago. So maybe by the time they get a shovel in the ground, we'll have some expanded bike lanes. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we mentioned earlier that item 6 was to be continued to February. So we're at item 7, I believe, reports and announcements from council members and ad hocs. So I'm going to ask any ad hocs with an update. And as you do this, please just take a moment for our newest council member, Councilmember Galindo, just to explain what your ad hoc does, or what you think the scope of that ad hoc is. And Councilmember Galindo, these are just sort of groups of no more than 3 that we have agreed as a larger council to set up. They're usually temporary, approximately a year-ish, and there may be an actual guideline on that I'm forgetting, but they tend to look at specific issues of interest. We have one, for example, on the Sonoma Developmental Center that has been sort of the incubator for some of the draft letters that we have submitted over the last year to Permit Sonoma and the Board of Supervisors. And I'll let my fellow council members describe more about the other ad hocs that they're part of at this point. Anyone want to jump in on this? Nikki's smiling. Oh, Co-Chair Dawson, go for it. Except you're muted, Arthur. It's not a Zoom meeting if we don't say that at least a few times. Yeah.
So I didn't really prepare, so I'm just going to say what's off the top of my head, which was just to let Patty know that, or Patricia know that one of the things we did on the transportation ad hoc last year was to survey the roads, local roads, and give some recommendations to TPW for the next year's or 2 paving projects. And we've also been advocating for improvements on the crosswalks in downtown Glen Ellen. And I forget, I know Councilmember Oldroyd is also on that ad hoc, and I think, well, Jed was on it as well, but he's no longer with us. So, but Susan, if you have anything else to add to that, but that's just kind of in a nutshell what we're looking at.
Okay,
And we're also talking about the bikeway that I mentioned earlier, but I'll save that for another time.
And just to report back, thank you for the notes that you made regarding the roads that you would like to see prioritized for repaving. We've combined that with the recommended roads from the Springs back, and Janice Thompson has been amazing, and Ariel has been amazing, actually. She's the spreadsheet queen in accumulating and who recommended it, and whether it's staff or the various facts. And I think we were planning for both of the 2-year cycles. And so we weren't able to put all of the roads in that you recommended in the first 2-year cycle, but we have extended it to the second 2-year cycle. And it includes the drainage and a lot of other comments that you made. So and sadly, you might have to recognize I'm a very large district. So it's not just Glen Ellen and Kenwood and the Springs, but there are roads in Bennett Valley, Sonoma Mountain Road, Taylor Heights, and eventually we're going to have to repave St. Helena Road because, man, it's in bad shape. So there are a lot of roads that I need to pay for. Could you quit driving?
I'm trying.
And so once we turn it in or put it into the formula and estimate how many miles of roads we can do with our available funding, then we'll bring it back to you as a report item. So to let you know, but your additions were invaluable. Thank you so much. And of course, you've been reading the paper on the storms and the damage of the storms to our roads that simply disappeared. $15 million and counting, which seems like a low number until you figure out how long it takes some of those projects to get funded, designed, funded, and completed. And we're going to be in storm cleanup for a number of years, and trying to get FEMA to fund some or all of that would be just great.
Did the other ad hoc have anything to add to this conversation this evening, or no updates for now? Please,
think
Councilmember.
that's us. Is that Mark and I?
Yeah, before you start, Councilmember Galindo, did you have a comment on the last?
I just wanted to thank you for giving that explanation of what an ad hoc group does. Greatly appreciated. As you know, I'm very new to this, so little by little, I will join you. Thank you so much for your support.
That would be great. And so, yeah, so just to confirm, so the transport would be Arthur and Susan Oldroyd, and then I am part of the SDC group with Council Member Matt Dickey and Angela Nardo Morgan. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, Council Member Handren. There's one more group that Vicky will describe right now, I think. Thanks, Vicky.
Sure, or I can defer to Mark because he tends to be more eloquent than I am, but we are, Mark and I are a signage ad hoc committee. I don't think that's our official name. There's signs and monuments, signs and.
Well, it's actually the Community Benefit Project.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's broader than signs, but go ahead.
So we are, I don't have any new updates for you this evening, but we are in the process of coming up with a plan to identify and develop a map with desired monuments, community benefit additions like benches or different things that are desired by the community. Mark, feel free.
Well, yeah, and I think, it's been a while since we've talked about this, and a lot of the project updates or ad hoc committee updates have been postponed because of other pressing issues in the last 3 meetings. But yeah, I think that some of the feedback we got was to conduct a master planning process to get public input on what kind of improvements are desired, needed, or even feasible. And we would like to, and we can get to this when we're talking about scheduling our future agenda, we would like to have this be a discussion at the MAC level to talk about the pros and cons of doing this master planning process, which could have pretty significant advisory implications, and get approval from the MAC before going off on an ad hoc mission. So that's something that we definitely want to get feedback on and approval, or at least a blessing, if you will, from the rest of our colleagues here on the MAC. And we haven't abandoned the idea of having entry signage, but this was an issue that had been previously broached by the Glen Ellen Forum with great interest in pursuing it. And they have developed some ideas. I don't know where they're at with that. They'll probably be discussing it at this Thursday's board meeting. But that's something that we can also weigh in on too, when that becomes a more public process.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for kind of giving us some grounding. And we can definitely talk about this in item 8 when we talk about the agenda. Anything else, anyone, before I turn it over to any public comments on this topic?
Yeah, Kate, if you wouldn't mind, I just wanted to give people a brief update on what came out of the emergency preparation ad hoc that has since dissolved. But it's become a life of its own, and we are now doing this community wildfire protection planning process that was funded through Fire Safe Sonoma, and that Ellie Inslee and myself have been working with a very dedicated cohort of neighborhood representatives throughout Glen Ellen to develop this. It's called the CWPP, this Wildfire Protection Plan for Glen Ellen. And we're going to be having a follow-up community meeting to present the plan and it will probably be in mid-March. And so we will be working with Glen Ellen Forum and with the Sonoma Valley Fire Protection District to present the plan, which will have been vetted and based on data and public input, as well as fire district participation. So that's going to be a really important meeting. It'll be a public meeting. It'll probably be a hybrid meeting that will be both Zoom and public participation. We're hoping to have it at the Dunbar School. So that's I think a pretty significant outcome from the MAC's work doing this emergency preparation work that we started. And I think that that's a real feather in our cap to have had it grow to this point. And I just wanted folks to know that once the ad hocs go away, that doesn't mean the project necessarily stops. It takes on a life of its own. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. And that will be to be scheduled, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
we'll put out an announcement and all that, and maybe we can even post it on the MAC's website and for the county. And but we'll definitely put it on the agenda.
Great. Councilmember Dickey, you had a comment.
So just to confirm, you will make a presentation to the MAC as well, Mark? Or somebody will?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yeah, I think there's sort of a social / political reason to do it if possible, I mean, since, your group was pretty instrumental in at least creating the seed and thought for it.
Absolutely, including you and Damon.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Oh yeah, that's right. We were the committee. But yes, absolutely. I mean, I could certainly do I was just going to do a report, but I think the most critical thing is there's two elements here. One is the public process, the community stakeholder meeting that will be announced and that everyone will have the opportunity to participate in, which is bigger than the MAC or the Glen Ellen Forum. It's going to be the whole community. There's many people who will come. And then the next step really is what kind of organization is formed out of this, because it's just going to be a plan. I mean, it could just sit on a shelf, right? Unless it's actually, unless an organization forms, whether it be a Firewise community or a fire safe council that would be specific to our community. And then that would take on a life of its own as either under the 501c3 of, say, the Glen Ellen Forum, or form its own status as an organization, and then seek out funding and working with community members to develop projects and implement these fire safe measures that are recommended in the plan, because the plan itself will have recommended projects. So there's a lot that has to happen before any real on the ground outcomes can come about. So it'll be interesting, but I'll keep you up to date. I can do a presentation if there's an interest, but I think the main thing is just to help get the word out to participate in the stakeholder meeting. But thanks, Matt.
Good. Sounds good. Thanks for that update. Yeah, and keep us posted. Anybody else? I'm going to ask the public to raise hands if they have anything to say, but I'll make sure that fellow can't. Nothing else.
What about an SDC ad hoc report?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think since the last letter was not drafted, it was drafted by our vice chair Arthur Dawson and me. So yeah, we don't have another update unless you or Angela have something to add on this, Matt. No, and I guess at some point we should talk about the future of that ad hoc and what we do with that. I don't know. Maybe we can table that for. It's a really we can't really be discussing here at this juncture exactly, or maybe we can since it's an ad hoc. So we need to decide what to do with that at some point. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just as a suggestion, perhaps what we would do is give periodic updates as to the status, you know? I mean, there's so much information that doesn't really get passed into the public except unless you're asking the questions, that it might be worthwhile to just do periodic updates, have they decided on a developer, is there going to be a lawsuit filed? Who's the litigant? Those sorts of things might be of interest to the community.
Yeah, okay.
And just a comment, Matt, I think many of us are asking those same questions that you just articulated. When will the state announce the selection of the development team? And then what? What's the time frame after that for a developer to work with the community, to develop a project, to work with Permit Sonoma on a development agreement, and then send that and the specifics of the project through the CAC, the BZA, and the board. I expect none of that will happen soon. And so we have some time to breathe before we become increasingly concerned about what's next. And so I've already talked with some members of the community or some members of the county, because I'm concerned that the budget year, July 1st, does not yet include funding for the continuation of fire services to continue Steve Akers' participation providing services and security for the site. So those are my two top line concerns about this moving forward, and I'll let you know if I hear any resolution, or I have an interesting proposal, but I'm not going to daylight it now because it's a lark at the moment.
So any reason not to keep the ad hoc going a little longer than a year to be an update provider in the near term? Any problem with that?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, no one's saying no.
And as long as you don't have to put a lot of energy into it, just have it continue for a while.
Yeah. Councilmember Newhouser, comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge everyone who worked on this issue, and the SDC ad hoc committee and the countless hours. I know that Arthur put in an unbelievable amount of time just researching and reading data, and many of our residents in our community have devoted so much of their lives to trying to stay on top of this situation and developing community support and putting together a community vision. It's just been an amazing effort and an amazing issue to rally the community around. But it's been exhausting. And I think we all ended up putting more time into this than probably most other issues that have faced us lately. And it's been going on for years now. So I just want to really acknowledge the ad hoc committee, and I really want to acknowledge our supervisor. Susan, you were amazing. I stuck in there for that 11-hour meeting from the beginning to the end, and it was painfully long. But Susan, I am so impressed at how you held your ground and stayed true to your word and your mission, and held the rest of the supervisors to account, and the permit department. So I thank you so much for your leadership on this.
You're welcome. And it took had a long conversation ahead of time with Chris Gorsey. Oh, Brown Act, damn. I could only talk with one board member. And so obviously Chris and I worked very carefully together on this issue. So, and he says not to heap too many kudos on him, because he has some friends who live in Glen Ellen who are really angry that the whole thing is not a park. I said it was never going to be a park, but you know, it's I'm a sigh to breathe, a breath at the end of that long meeting, and there is some resolution documents on Permit Sonoma. So you might go onto the Permit Sonoma website, and to give you, you know, chunk, I have not done that yet. Greg Carr has some issues with what they actually printed on the documents. So but I think everybody, and of course we chased Brian O right out of the county. He's in a urban environment of Petaluma and probably loving every minute of it. But thank you all. It is such an honor to work with incredibly knowledgeable, dedicated, patient, for the most part, people on this issue. And it shows what a community can do by working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Whew. Okay. On that note, I think I'm ready to open up to public comment on this item, which would be ad hoc committees. Hearing, seeing no other hands. Does anyone have a comment? Anyone have a public comment on this issue?
And looking to our attendees, I see no hands.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. So we're on to our item 8, consideration of items for future agenda. Hannah Whitman, aide to Supervisor Gorin and our tireless administrative support. Do you want to go ahead and do your brief presentation on the bylaws and budget before we have the open discussion? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I promise the shortest PowerPoint possible for you all, just to give a little bit of information that might be helpful in your conversation on thinking about agenda items for the year ahead. All right, are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
All right, so well, I guess I'm already jumping right into it. So I promise only have 2 slides for you, and the first is to just review the max budget. So I think it's been over a year since you've had a budget presentation, so this might be helpful to remind yourselves. Supervisor Gorin has allocated each MAC $10,000 per fiscal year as part of their budget, and that's July 1st through June 30th. Your $10,000 can be used for ongoing expenses and special projects as approved by Supervisor Gorin. Each project has to go through the board for approval. So this is important to keep in mind to have a good amount of lead time. We can't exactly rush your budget allocations. So that's good to keep in mind if you're thinking about wanting to use some of your budget. And as you've approved in the past for other budget allocations, we have a simple budget request form. It needs to be approved by your MAC before going through the board item process. And your funding does not roll over year to year. So that is sorry, my phone's ringing, by June 30th, and then it restarts on July 1st. So a review of your budget of the current fiscal year, 2022-2023, is that your expenses through your December meeting have been $975 for minute taking, and that leaves you with a balance of just over $9,000. And then I just want to flag some anticipated upcoming expenses that have not been utilized by the MAC since you started meeting via Zoom, is that it's anticipated starting in March that the MAC will be meeting in person. And so we can anticipate that there will be some expenses related to venue rental and other in-person meeting type expenses. And then on to my next slide. So since you'll be talking about agenda items for the year to come, or things that you want to see come to the MAC in 2023, just wanted to remind us all of your advisory topics that are laid out in your bylaws. So this is in Article 2, Section 1. And so the first one there, prioritization of transportation, transit, traffic calming, bike and pedestrian improvements, health and human safety, homelessness, housing, community projects, such as art cleanups and vegetation. So that's in terms of historically what kinds of things MAC budgets have been used for are partnering with community organizations. I believe in 2021 you did a partnership for a Dia de los Muertos altar, so that could be something kind of aligned with this item. And then lastly, fire services and community preparedness. Oh, there's one more. Oh, additional topics as requested by the supervisor. So a little flexibility built in there, but those are your advisory topics. So our next steps here is your discussion on your desired topics for 2023 MAC meetings. So I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Eagles.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And Hannah, do you have the Word document of the list of topics that we looked at in 2022?
Yes, and I can go ahead and
Just
share
might
that
get us
now.
thinking. I know we had a few things. We had, I think it was DPW for the other bike trails that we just mentioned, water management, potentially ad hoc updates, couple things. But this is as mentioned, just a list of our meeting topics. It is backwards chronologically, starting with most recent, because that's how last year's report was structured. If that is not intuitive to folks, let us know, and I can change it when we incorporate this list into the annual report. But just a reminder of meetings, and maybe we can just sort of scroll up as you guys look through them. Of course, we had special meeting, we had meeting to write the final letter. And then I'll let you guys look at some of the topics we had here. Moving down. Great, thank you. Yeah. So oh, go ahead, please, Hannah. Yeah.
We have the same timing. Would you like me to stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, does everyone feel like they had a chance to look at that? Anyone want me to back up? This was just because we didn't have the report, which I'd hope to have this time, just to remind us of some of the things we did last year, some of the topics we looked at. Anyone want to go up again, or we all good? Hearing nothing, I guess we're all good. So did I hear correctly that we have scheduled for February someone regarding the non-Caltrans bike paths? I'm sorry, it's not really the technical term, but was that correct that we have another bike path presentation for February or potential?
It is a briefing on the Arnold Drive bike lanes project. And there needs to be right-of-way acquisition, some trees coming down. Some of the culverts along the side of the road need to be covered and to allow, excuse me, some road width for widening the lanes. About a half-mile north of the Agua Caliente roundabout and a half-mile south. If you drive along there, you know exactly where it is.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that's something for February.
And I believe that there will be a short presentation regarding a potential development at the property, the vacant land opposite the Hannah Boys Center, the Hannah Center now.
As part of that, or in at similar timing, or
different presentations, but they're sort of closely linked together.
Okay, great. Oh, Councilmember Dickey, please go ahead.
I saw that, have we decided on a venue for our March in-person meeting?
Through the chair, I can answer that.
Please, yeah.
We're still working on it, but if you have any
Okay.
recommendations, you're welcome to reach out to me. I have a few leads.
SDC, baby.
Probably not.
Can we put a teepee up and have it under a teepee?
Is it gonna rain?
Storm is getting to us now. I can hear it. Councilmember Dawson.
I remember at one point we talked,
Oop, you
Oop,
just
you're
went-
muted.
at one point we talked about going back and forth between Kenwood and Glen Ellen. Which we could do. I don't know if we want to talk about that, probably not today, but next month, or maybe it's up to Hannah how she has to deal with it, but I can imagine Mayflower Hall and Glen Ellen and Kenwood Depot and Kenwood.
Those are good ideas. Yeah.
I will just, sorry, through the chair, add that the Kenwood, I think the Rotary meets at the Kenwood Depot on your meeting date. So in order to meet there, you would have to change your meeting date. But we can certainly look at other options in both Glen Ellen and Kenwood.
And the good news is that we feel comfortable coming back together. And I think our community may not be necessarily happy about you meeting in person because it may mean that we may not have Zoom capability for that. So I keep cursing and saying, it's still an emergency. We want to be meeting in the Zoom, but the governor disagrees with me. Really?
Yeah, so I had that conversation today because I don't disagree, and I think a hybrid system is difficult to pull off well unless you're in a really, nice space that can accommodate. So it's probably not likely that we're going to be able to do a hybrid. And will you remind me again, Supervisor Gordon, is that a state law? It's a requirement, right? It's a state requirement. Okay, thank you. I was asked that today, and I was like, I think so.
The silver lining in COVID is our amazing technological ability to Zoom. Who knew we were allowed to do that and had the capability of doing that? We're so comfortable participating in meetings from our living room. And I look at Angela on her comfy couch and I say, oh, those days are numbered.
Yeah, yes. Councilmember Oldroyd.
I have another suggestion for Kenwood, which is the fire station. Has a public meeting room.
I know the fire station in Glen Ellen will not let you have meetings there, but maybe Kenwood will.
Please go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Dunbar School is kind of at the upper edge of Glen Ellen and is not as far from Kenwood. It could be a compromised location and has been used frequently for public meetings.
The multi-purpose room of Dunbar School, that location is great, a little difficult to find. It's going to be lightening up, so it'll be easier to find. It's a large room, so it's challenging to feel warm and cozy in that room, but it's the way it is.
Could we do it in the library?
Oh,
Smaller building?
We have a
and we know
connection.
somebody
We
who's
know
the
somebody.
librarian at Dunbar School.
Yeah.
And any other thoughts for agenda? We sort of tend to do this somewhat iteratively, not plan out the whole thing, or we have in the past. We have a few thoughts for February or moving forward. But if there are others, obviously we'll have this discussion.
I would suggest one of the classrooms at Dunbar, but I don't think I could sit in one of those desks.
You wouldn't fit. Vice Chair Dawson, you comment? Yeah.
Kate, you and I were talking a few days ago about kind of wanting to get a better clarity on exactly, how the MAC should be fielding development issues. On some level, it seems like that's the CAC's job. And, we appreciated the opportunity to chime in on SDC, but are we going to continue to do that kind of thing? And what should be our role, or, what's kind of expected? What do we want? What would Susan like to see? What's within our purview? I don't know, all those kinds of things.
You've done a great job of submitting comments to the CAC and that's the dual role of Matt. He can let you know what issues, or we can let you know what issues are coming forward. And issues of importance, you may want to weigh in to the MAC, to the CAC on those issues.
Okay.
Okay.
So for example, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but we could send a letter in about the Hannah development. If we decided that was important. Or
they will have presentations talking about what your thoughts are. What questions do you have? Because they may have a project in the back of their mind, but they have not submitted a formal application, I think, to permit Sonoma. They're still in listening stage. And they are just going to participate or do an announcement in the public comment part of the CAC. And so they're not going to be doing a presentation to the CAC on this yet. It will, it's going to take some time to develop their ideas and formalize their application. So you will have time for that.
Okay, so we can stay involved as much as we would like to, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay.
Mark, please go ahead.
Well, and we'll continue to be a venue or at least a forum for public input regarding these issues. I mean, they're just like Deb Poole's statement earlier. And it'd be great if we can, on an ad hoc basis, take on the role of supporting or looking into some of the issues that are raised when they're brought to our doorstep. So I think that having that flexibility is really helpful. Two specific requests. One earlier I mentioned for an agenda item is the discussion of the role of the Community Benefit Projects Committee to discuss this master planning process. And I think that would be great if we could, if Vicki and I could present something and then have input and an action. At least, I don't know what kind of action we would expect other than a blessing to move forward with a process. And then the other issue that is one that's kind of the little elephant in the room here is as attendance, participants, or at our meetings. And 2 is great, but it's not a significant number. I think we could get the word out. I think that we could have had a lot more attendees at this meeting given the presentation of the trails, because I think that the local Glen Ellen residents would have been very interested, and somehow we're not getting the word out. Anyway, I think that the reason why I'm asking it to be agendized is because I think that it would be worth discussing how we're doing outreach, how we're getting the word out about this, and how we can increase attendance to our monthly meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think, we can revisit this, but at one point the chair and vice chair were looking at outreach because that was sort of an integral part of what we needed to do. And I think since I've come on board, I sort of haven't really thought that through. So, Yeah, maybe we should talk about that more. Because you're right, and we're going to have the additional challenge that we just talked about is having an in-person meeting, which, you know, personally, I don't think it's going to help our numbers, but we're going to have to sort of see what we can do with that. So I appreciate that comment. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
someone
there's-
else, yeah, yeah.
And there's no fault, by anyone here. It's more of a discussing how we can all,
Sure.
participate and help with outreach, and come up with a systematic way of doing it where someone actually carries that responsibility of making sure the word gets out, agendas get shared with the forum, and they can do the outreach to the community, or it gets put into the Kenwood Press. I just think that there's certain things that we can do on a regular basis to really advertise, if you will, to make sure that people are aware of what we're talking about. And if we have compelling speakers and compelling topics, people will show up. Thank you.
Yeah. Point noted. Thank you. Angela.
I just wanted to agree with Mark on that. It's something actually that Kate and you and I were talking about recently. It's just very concerning that we are a public organization in service to the county and two people show up. It's that's not really what we're here about. We're here to really bring information to the public. That's our role. And so I agree with Mark. We need to somehow engage the public in a bigger way. That might be just putting our agenda in the Kenwood Press, in the Index Tribune, in the Sun. I mean, I think it's something we really need to prioritize and really need to work on. So I want to support that comment. Thank you.
Councilmember Dickey, go ahead.
I would agree with all of those comments. The only aside I would say is that it is topic related. When we were discussing SDC so extensively and making presentations, we had a lot of participation. So the numbers have dropped for sure, but I do think that it's topic related. I mean, for instance, the county's working on vacation rental stuff, right? So when a presentation about vacation rentals comes up, I would imagine that there's more participation if we let people know what's going on, because it has such a vast impact on so many of the people that are within our population. So I mean, that would be the only comment I would make, is that the drop in numbers is concerning, but I think it's also topic related.
Yeah. Councilmember Handren, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to agree with everything that's been said, but in particular with Matt's comments. When I was on the outreach subcommittee, I spoke with the representatives from the Springs MAC, and that's exactly what their experience was, that attendance is the biggest factor in attendance is topics. And when you have a topic that people care about, they show up and they talk about it. So really, I think part of that conversation about attracting people is really identifying those topics that are going to be meaningful to the community.
Yeah. Understood. Anyone else have suggestions for topic areas? I won't belabor this though. If we don't have any more tonight, we'll wrap it up. Arthur, please go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I'll just say that one thing that I haven't done in the last few months is speak at the forum and give an update about the MAC. So that's one other place we can do a little outreach and probably get some more audience. But I agree with what everyone said. I think it is the topics, and I think it's also January. People had a big holiday. So we had a big year and big holiday season, and to be totally honest, if I wasn't on the MAC, I probably wouldn't be here either.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
I really like, even though bike trails are a big interest, still, next month to be different, but January. So I don't think we should take this too hard.
And on that note, if there's any reciprocity possible there, Arthur, let's say you do present to the forum, what do people want to talk about? Obviously the forum takes on some of those and we have a different role, but we can ask the public too what they want to hear.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Yeah. they didn't have a January meeting, so actually I'll make a, you or I can speak at the MAC meeting next month. And give an update and yeah, ask that question.
Okay, now, and we've identified we need to do some outreach and we haven't quite identified how. So I'll think about that a little bit because I know it's challenging, to do that consistently and well. So we'll, yeah, but we can at least try to get the agenda out a little bit more broadly. All right, guys, I don't want to keep us too much longer if we don't need to be. So any other topics for 2023 at the moment? If not, I'm going to open it up to our final public comment for the evening on this topic. I'm not seeing any hands. Anyone from the public wish to raise their hand and make a comment on topics for 2023?
And I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay. All right. Well, of course, this is a fluid conversation too. So if other topics come up that you think of, share them. Otherwise, I think we've come to the end of our agenda. Woo-hoo. So thank you, everybody. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to
So moved.
adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor.
Aye.
Fine.
Well, thank you to all of you for being here tonight and to our members of the public. Appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon, next month.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kate.
Good night.
Thanks,
Good night,
Susan.
everybody. Thank you.
Susan.
And thank you, Patricia, for being here on your first meeting. Very glad to have
Yay,
you.
Patricia.
Yeah,
thank you,
likewise.
Patricia.
Thank
Great
you
to see you.
for having me for the inclusion.
Absolutely. Good night, all.